And it has recently been scientifically shown that people would rather endure physical pain and discomfort than they would boredom. They would rather hurt than be bored. There was a study done at the University of Virginia that hundreds of college students lined up for, 418 if I remember exactly. And in that study, they were asked to sit alone in a room quietly. That's it. They put a chair in a room and asked them to sit for between, and this is shocking, 6 and 14 minutes. No phones, no computers, no doodling, no toys, no nothing. They were just supposed to sit alone with their thoughts. And afterwards, surveys were done, and it was shown that this was really, really difficult for them. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, they rated their happiness factor during that time as very, very low. And if you set me in a room by myself and said, do nothing for 14 minutes, I would hug you. But they didn't like it. And in later studies, so they stopped doing college students, and they went on to churches and the marketplace, workplace, and they started bringing people in, and they upped the ante, so to speak. They started shocking people. So when the people came in for the study, they would have to endure an electric shock. That was part of the study. And 100% of the people who took the electric shock said they would pay $5 not to take the shock again. So it was pretty uncomfortable. Everybody said, I'd pay $5 not to have to go through that again. But then they repeated the study, and they put them alone in a room for between 6 and 14 minutes with the exception that they could stop if they shocked themselves again. And a shocking amount of people chose to endure the pain. 67% of men and 25% of women. Now, what can we learn from this? First off, men are bozos, right? It took me a second on this picture to figure out what was going on, but once you get it. But it shows 14 minutes, 6 minutes is all they were asking. But they would rather endure a shock that they would have paid not to endure rather than sit there in solitude and quiet alone with their thoughts. It's pretty ridiculous if you think. We've been dealing with a quote from Tom Bodett, and we've been talking about being thirsty. And Tom Bodett says that there are 3 things that people need in this world. He says they need someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for. And then the last 3 messages, we've been dealing with that issue of somebody to love. And that I think this whole list is fulfilled in Jesus, in God. God gives you something to love, someone to love, and He loves you in return. It's that perfect love where it's a mutual love. And then He gives you something to do. I believe that when you're a follower of Jesus, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, it puts you on a mission and it gives you a lover. And those are things to be excited about. That's something to do. And then the next service that we have together, we're going to talk about something to hope for and how God fulfills that as well. But today, we're talking about something to do. So the sermon's titled, Bored No More. I just feel like boredom is inexcusable for God's children. People post on Facebook, I'm bored. And I want to post, then get a life. There's no excuse for boredom. Even sitting silently, golly, when you're a follower of Jesus and you know God is there, that's just a beautiful thing. It really is amazing to sit with no phone, no TV, no radio, and just be quiet and listen to Him or watch what He's created. It's really incredible. But I want to point out 2 people, and I'm using the masculine gender here, but it applies to everybody, 2 men that have really no excuse for boredom. And the first is a man on a mission. Isn't it true that if you have a goal, if you have a direction, there's no time for boredom? When you have something in front of you that you desperately want, say you want to run in a triathlon. Well, you don't have time for boredom. You got to go get in shape. You got to learn how to eat right. When you have a mission, there's no time to sit around doing nothing, unless sitting around doing nothing is part of that mission. But even then, it doesn't become boredom. And so a man on a mission has no excuse to be bored. And then a man with a lover. A man in love. I remember the day after I sat down with my wife, Kara, who unfortunately is over in the children's ministry. You guys don't get to meet her today. But I remember when I sat down with her one night, and I basically said, how about you and me, babe? And she said, that sounds like a good plan. And I said, groovy. And so we got together. And I remember the next day, I'm driving to meet her parents because I want to go get their blessing on our relationship. And I look down, and I'm driving literally 103 miles an hour. And I remember thinking, if a cop pulled me over, I'd just tell him I'm in love. I remember thinking that. And so I took off the gas. But when you're in love and your heart's beating fast, there's no place for boredom in that. A person with a lover. And so we're going to talk about a man with a lover. And I want you to picture a guy like this. And he's sitting on a park bench somewhere by himself. And he's a little soft in the middle, kind of like I am. And a little bald on the head, kind of like I am. And got a hairy back, kind of like some people do. And but he's just your average guy. You wouldn't call him a model for J. Crew by any stretch. But this woman walks up to him. And so I heard a conversation a few months back where people were talking about who the most beautiful celebrities were. And, of course, you get the magazines that say the 100 most beautiful people in the world. And I talked to my wife. She's perfectly comfortable with me sharing this with you. But I think maybe the most beautiful woman on earth physically, probably if I got to know her personally, she'd just drive me nuts. But physically is this woman, Monica Bellucci, who you might know as the woman who played Mary in The Passion of the Christ. And she's been in a lot of other movies as well. But let's pretend a Monica Bellucci clone walks up to this dude sitting on the park bench, and she just says, "You are amazing, and I love you. Can we be together?" And it turns out she's rich, and she wants to travel the world with him, and she's just personable and funny and happy and easy to get along with, and she's just amazing. Like from start to finish, she's a perfect 10 across the board. Now, she starts putting on Facebook's pictures of her with this guy. And her friends and everybody else is thinking, what is she doing with him? And he's thinking, what is she doing with me? But she just keeps putting these pictures up, and she keeps touching him and rubbing him and kissing him and loving him and telling him how great he is and wants to have kids with him. And it turns out to be the real deal. Now, do you think in any way his Facebook status will ever say bored? Or do you think there's going to be other stuff he starts posting? I mean, don't you think there'd be some kind of excitement that would occur in his life? Don't you think people would say, man, he's a man on a mission and he's got a lover? I mean, something's going on there. And I even suspect he would start changing. I even suspect it would start change the way he takes care of his health, change the way he starts thinking about life. But do you see, boredom would vanish. I'm convinced a man with a lover has no place or time to be bored. I have a place I go to be with God. And it's about 5 houses down from my house. And it's this lake right there. The kid with the mohawk is my child. And this is about 5 houses down from my house. And I'll go sit, and I'll go 3, 4, 5 times a week. And I'll walk around this pond. Or there's a park bench that I'm sitting on in this picture. And I'll just sit there. And when you sit there, all the geese and the ducks, they swarm you. Because people come and they throw out bread. And so there's ducks and geese, and we see chipmunks and squirrels and rabbits. And the other day I saw a lark. I think it was a stork or a lark, one of the big long-legged birds flying by. We've seen chipmunks and groundhogs, and it's just unbelievable the wildlife that lives right in the middle of Louisville. But when I go there just to connect with God. That's my goal, is I just want to hear from Him. I want to experience Him. And it's so easy to sit on that bench when your mind is tuned on my lover God, to see how glamorous, how unbelievable, how awesome He is. I look at the fountain, and I think this may be ridiculous to some of you, and this may not be the kind of thing you would think about, but I think about the life cycle of water. And I think that the water, gravity pulls it down, and it's in this pool, and then it evaporates, and it goes up, and it forms the clouds, and those clouds travel over to Maine and Boston and over the ocean, and there's like this filtration system. So even though the geese and the ducks are going to the bathroom in this pond, somehow that process purifies the water. Because I don't know anybody that won't drink rainwater, right? Rainwater is pure water. So something happens when it goes up there, this system that all the other stuff goes out. And it goes across the globe, and it waters fields, and it creates corn. And corn feeds people. And somewhere over in India is a guy that's using the bathroom on the street, and somehow that's evaporated and filtered and flown through the air and eventually ends up back at my pond. And these are the kind of things that I think about, that the system is just unbelievable. And that's just one thing at my pond. I look at the grass and the colors and I see and the sunlight, and I think about the sunlight and all the colors that I see, the brown on the duck's necks and the black on the duck's necks versus the greenish blue of the water versus the bright green of the grass. And it's essentially all this light flooding from this big, flaming, gaseous ball, just so far away, happens to be slamming into my area, and the wavelengths that come off of that light are meeting the cones and rods in my eye in a certain way where I pick up on all this vibrance. It's beautiful. It's unbelievable. And you see, I have a lover who's an artist. So in this clip, Lizzie, who's the girl, she for quite a while has been wrong about Darcy. Darcy's the guy who owns the place, owns the palace, owns the art. And for a long time, they kind of butted heads. And now she's starting to find out that she's kind of in love with the guy. And so she sees his house, and you saw her expression. It's like, oh, holy smokes, I knew he was rich, but come on. And she goes in, and she sees all this art. And it was pretty neat. I've actually seen this art on display, the statue you see there, at a museum in Atlanta. And Ryan was with me. Where's Ryan Brooks? Ryan was with me, so when he saw this picture yesterday, I was showing him part of this presentation. He said, oh, that's that statue from Atlanta, because this thing just takes my breath away. How do you take this massive piece of granite or marble or whatever it is? I mean, you're talking a big, just stinking stone that somebody ripped out of the earth and say, make a woman out of that covered in a veil, but I want to see her eyes. How do you do that out of rock? And I think they did just about as good as you possibly could. And it still blows my mind that that's rock that somebody has chiseled away and polished to make look like that. So you see Lizzie staring at that statue, and it was funny because I have been in the same position she was in. It just, wow. And the statues all around, and the painted ceilings, and she falls a little bit more in love at that point. She thinks, if I was with this man, I could see this art every day. I could wake up to this beautiful display. I could walk through his house and see these paintings. There's something romantic. There's something beautiful and compelling and unbelievably impressive about a display like that in someone's home. But when we talk about art, replicas are kind of junky. A replica is worth far less than the original. So this original piece is amazing, but if somebody tried to give you a replica of this statue, wow, it'd be pretty cool, but it just wouldn't have that thing to it that the real deal has. And here's what I want to point out to you is every attempt at art is a replica. Any attempt to carve a veiled woman out of rock is an attempt to replicate an actual veiled woman out of rock, which an artist cannot create. For an artist to create a real woman with emotions and feelings and thoughts and a will and biology that's self-replicating and hair that grows and fingernails that grow and fingers that touch is so far beyond human capacity that it makes even the veiled woman kind of worthless in comparison. Any painting you ever see, I love the 15th century Dutch masters. If you go to big-time museums, ask to see those because they're oil paintings that just pop out of the canvas. And they look real. They look like real people that you could actually go and touch. Like their eyes glisten with tears. And it's so amazing. But you see, it's still a replica of the real deal. God has created the real deal around us all day. He said, I'm your lover. I have all this art on display for you to come and see. Come and see it every day. And there's a passage in the book of John where he's going on and he's talking theology. It's kind of neat, but he is right in the middle of it, he like changes course and he says these words. He says, behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us that we should be called children of God. It's like an outburst in the middle of his sermon. It's like it doesn't even belong there. But you see John, who was Jesus' best friend on earth, you see him all of a sudden say, wow, incredible, unbelievable. That I could be a child of God. That what is Monica Bellucci doing with me? It doesn't make sense. What is the God of the universe that created actual veiled women? What is He doing with me? It's mind-boggling. And so what I want to do in this sermon is I want to give you 2 tips to help you treat God as the lover that He deserves. He is your lover. He is your God. He is your Father and your most intimate companion and best friend. And that's who He wants to be to you. And I want to give you 2 tips that I think God deserves as the lover that has put his art on display for us. And the first is to start every day with one word, and it's the word, wow. I mean, really, if you think most people, they open their, oh, do I have to get up now? Or, golly, that kid screamed all night. Or, oh, if I just didn't have to go to work today, if it was just a Saturday. But instead, isn't it unbelievable that your eyelids will open up and that light will flood the cones and rods in your eyes and you can see? Isn't it unbelievable that you can get up and feel and brush your own teeth and walk on the wood floors or the carpet or whatever it is that you have in your house and feel what that feels like and think about the pattern in that wood? And that was created from the artist, the great artist, carved out of trees somewhere hundreds, thousands of miles from here. If you can open your eyes every day with the word wow, wow, and you walk around every day with this expression on your face, holy smokes, unbelievable. That's how it ought to be. When a man's in love, that's how he feels. And when you love God the way he loves you, this is your expression a lot of time. This is what life looks like. Tim Keller talks about two kinds of people. He talks about religious people, who he calls the moralists, and then he talks about genuine Christians. And he says the moralists are working really hard to kind of put God at their beck and call, which means I'm going to go to Bible study, I'm going to pray, I'm going to say the right things, I'm going to give up cussing and smoking and drinking and rock and roll and sex, and I'm going to stop doing all these bad things. And when I do that, God will owe me something. And then there's the Christian who says, God owes me nothing, and yet here he is sitting on the park bench with me. Wow. Jesus talks about, and this is the drawing of the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. And the Pharisee was a religious guy back in his days. You know, he was today's priests or pastors or, the big dog that would get up front that would make the public prayers. And then the tax collectors were kind of the dredges of society, the bad guys, the prostitutes, the scumbags. That's how they viewed the tax collectors. And Jesus tells this story of in the temple, the Pharisees stood up in front of God and said, God, I'm so thankful that you have made me who I am. And he says, I fast 2 times a week. I give offerings to the poor. I follow all these rituals. I do everything you want. Thanks for making me me. But the tax collector is embarrassed, and he hangs his head, and he says, God, I know I deserve nothing from you. I know that you don't owe me anything, and I don't even have the right to come in front of you right now. Help me. And Jesus says only one of these 2 men left justified before God that day. And I think it's clear which one he was saying it was. And it becomes clear in the text that that's exactly who it was. It's the one who comes before him and says, you owe me nothing. I owe you everything. And Keller says it like this. He says, when you're a genuine Christian, these are words that are in your head a lot. He says, a spirit of wonder permeates your life. You're always saying, how miraculous, how interplanetary, how unreal. And then he says, me, a Christian, incredible, unbelievable, a joke. See, I know me, and I know the nasty, terrible thoughts that circle around in my head, and how lazy I can be, and how prone to boredom I am in this world filled with art. And I know that I am the tax collector, I'm the dredge, I'm the scumbag, and yet this beauty has come to me and said, I want to be yours. Will you be mine? And that's an attitude that permeates you when you're a hold of Jesus. And then the second issue I want to talk about, I'll tell you a story. When I first got married, I was 31 years old, and I had saved up money for years. I was on a salary that really, it was about $700 a month, but I was selling on eBay. I'd buy at thrift stores and sell on eBay and sell on Craigslist. And I had managed to save, by the time I was 31 years old, I'd managed to save $9,000 that way. I'd paid off my students' loans, and I'd saved up $9,000, which was a huge deal on my money. And I had blocked off a summer, like 3 months, and I had hooked up with some friends from Minnesota in that area, and we were going to Tibet. We were going to India. We were going to hike the Himalayas. We were going to set up base camp and spend weeks trekking to Annapurna and some of those areas. I mean, we were planning this trip. But then something got in the way. I sat down on a park bench with Kara, said, hey, baby, how about you and me? She said, that sounds like a good idea. I said, groovy. And all of a sudden, we needed this place. We needed a place to live. And to buy a house, you need a down payment. So I took my $9,000 and I said, I'm not going to go on this trip. I'm going to get married instead. And so do you see that when you have a lover, it requires something of you. Now this lover, the Monica Bellucci that sits down with you and says, I want you, I love you, I need you, does it with no strings attached. That's how God is. But it becomes natural that when I'm a little soft in the middle and this smoking hottie comes to me and says, I want to be with you, I'd kind of like to trim that down a little bit. Because I realize that when I look at the Facebook pictures and she's looking that way and I'm looking this way, I wish those weren't even posted there. So I'd like to kind of get in shape. I'd like to start changing a little bit. I'm going to start shaving my shoulders and back. And it's not out of compulsion. She's going to love me anyway. She has made it perfectly crystal clear that it has nothing to do with how I look or how I feel or how I am. It's something else. And yet, wanting to be a lover to her compels change in my life. And you know what? It is worth it. This is a picture I took of a couple things I keep on my desk. That's my smoking hottie, Kara, right there. And this is a little thing I keep on my desk. It says, 10 reasons why I love and adore my husband. He's a genius. He's real. Let's just read that, shall we? My favorite is he's one fine specimen of manhood. And if you turn that thing over and open it up, there's detailed descriptions on all of those points that she doesn't want everybody to see. She doesn't care if you guys see this list. She doesn't want to see the specifics, like how nice my butt is and stuff like that, okay? But this woman, I'm often hesitant to tell this, but it's so amazing, so awesome that I like to tell it. She rubs me to sleep virtually every night. Like, we're talking good, serious arm, leg, back massages until I am out cold. Virtually every night of my life for the last 8, 9, 10 years. I don't know how, I'm like, what is she doing with me? Now, would you trade a grueling trip in the Himalayas for a nightly massage for the rest of your life? I would. And that's just one of 1,000 things she does because she loves me. And sometimes she's rubbing me and I'm drifting off to sleep. I'll say, why are you so good to me? She says, because I love you. And But you see, it's a good trade. When you find a lover, that is worth more than anything. That's worth more than gold. It's worth more than any trip in the Himalayas. And God is that lover, and it's worth anything. He's worth anything. He'll do anything for you. He did go to the limits for you. He hung on a cross, tortured, and died for you. The Westminster Catechism says this. It's their first tenet of faith. It says, what is the duty of mankind? It says, man's chief duty is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. See, He just wants to fill your life with Himself. And He is the source of all light and goodness and wonder and amazement. He just wants to put a little thing on your desk that says, 10 reasons I love Abby. I love Abby for this reason and this reason and this reason. He wants you to wake up every morning with, wow, look who's in bed beside me. Look who's holding my hand as I walk through my day. That's what He wants to do in your life. But I want to point out how John finishes his little abrupt exclamation during his epistle. He says, behold, wow, holy smokes, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us that we should be called children of God. And then a couple verses later, he says, and everyone who has this hope in Him purifies himself just as He is pure. In other words, if I'm going to stand next to this beauty, I want to start taking a little bit better care of myself. If I'm going to walk hand in hand with God, I'd like to represent Him a little bit better. I want to make Him look good. I want to post His picture on my Facebook and everybody to see that He's affecting me and that I'm with Him and that we're close. He says, everyone who knows they're a child of God purifies themselves. And I mentioned Abby a while ago. Abby is unbelievably awesome. She's my basement dweller at this time. She's living in the basement of our house. And she crawls out of there every morning and makes coffee. And anybody that knows Abby knows she is sunshine. I think that's the most apt, perfect word to describe her. And I've lived with her for several months here, and then I've been around their family, and I know how she acts and how she thinks. And I'm telling you, I can't say all, that would be a lie. The vast majority of what she thinks about is other people. She's constantly and consistently thinking, that lady I met at Goodwill, how can I help her life? And shows up with cookies and offers prayer. She's constantly going to nursing homes, even when nobody else will go with her. She's constantly calling friends and saying, hey, would you come to church with me? She's a hard worker, and she's starting to get ripped because she's working out so hard in her house. She's just got her good job at life. Well done. But I want to show you a couple pictures that, in my opinion, are foundational as to why Abby is such an amazing person that accurately represents Jesus. I think if somebody said, show me a person that looks like Jesus, I'd probably say Abby. She'd probably be one of the very first people that ever popped in my mind. But I want to show you a couple pictures that I think show why. I don't know why this keeps logging out, but it does. I'll be with you in a moment. Talk amongst yourselves. Here we go. Here's one of them. This is Abby's Bible. And I suspect this isn't your first Bible. I'll bet this is like her 10th Bible. And I'll bet the other ones ended up in rattier shape than this one. Here's an inside to her Bible. This is what it looks like on the inside. When you find a lover, if you want to be a good lover in return, doesn't it make sense that you would want to find out what they like? Wouldn't you want to find out how they think? Don't you want to know what turns them on? Don't you want to know what makes them feel special? And you see, when Abby pulls out that Bible every day, I see her on our back porch, every day, she's opening up that Bible and marking it and thinking, what does this mean to my life? And posting about it online on her blog. If you don't read her blog, you should. But don't you see a correlation between these pictures and her life? Isn't there probably a connection between those two? So here's my other recommendation. Number one is you wake up and you say, wow. Let that be number one. Let that be the first thing, is that every day as you walk through life, you're noticing the world around you. And you're saying, thank you. Wow, beautiful, incredible. But the second thing is this. Find out who your lover is. Pursue him. I see Facebook posts all the time where people, they spout religious stuff. They spout their particular theologies or the arguments that they have or the things that they think. And I always want to reply, I always want to comment, how much thought have you put into this? People will stand up and act like they've got the whole world figured out where religion is concerned. And yet they haven't spent any time at all really trying to pursue and study. And I'm not saying you have to have a bachelor's degree to comment on Facebook, but what I am saying is learn. Be a person that says, no matter where you're at, you may have come in here today saying there is no God. I don't think there is a God. I think science explains everything. I think matter is all there is. Well, learn. Study. Figure out why you think that. Do you just think it because some schmo on some website said it? And likewise, I don't think you ought to be a Christian just because mom and dad said you ought to be. I don't think you ought to be a Christian just because I'm up here standing and talking about how great Jesus is. That's not good enough. Make your Bible look like this. Make other books look like this. Make other conversations like this where you're constantly learning, thinking, feeling, wondering. Because here's what I believe. Scriptures teach that if you will seek the truth, you will find it. And I'm not afraid of seekers. I'm not afraid of people saying, well, I really don't know. You're going to hear me say that from up here a whole lot. I don't know. I don't have it all figured out. And so I challenge you, start every day with wow, and then let that wow turn into exploration and into study. And I'll close with this scripture out of Revelation. This describes what heaven is like. It says, now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and first earth had passed away. And it says, I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with men, and he will live with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. See, when we think of heaven, a lot of people think of harps and angels and streets of gold. But when the scriptures talk about heaven, some of those things are talked about. But when it really wants to encapsulate what heaven is like, it says, God will dwell with men. He will be there for us to touch and experience. And when that happens, all the tears are gone. No more crying. No more pain. It's an amazing thing to be with God. But Jesus taught one prayer. He said, if People came to Jesus and said, how do we pray? What do we say when we pray? He says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And then he says, on earth as it is in heaven. He says, when you pray, pray that heaven invades earth. Pray that your life and your experience here will have as much of there as possible. And you see that there is him being close. And when that's your pursuit in life, and somebody says, hey, I'd like you to come to this study where all you have to do is sit in a room and do nothing, you think, yeah, awesome, yes, I will come and sit in a room, because boredom is thrown out the window. When you have a lover and the mission becomes him, glorifying God is the mission in life, knowing him, there's no place for boredom.